afternoon. My name is Jessica Dean, and I'm with AIM Transportation Solutions. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm going to give you a really brief introduction before we get started. At AIM, we maintain over 11,000 vehicles that are out there on the road, and we employ hundreds of drivers that are operating them. When the CVSA holds its International Roadcheck, as it's doing this upcoming May 4th through 6th, we work very diligently to prepare, and we want to help our customers prepare. The Roadcheck is a 72-hour inspection blitz during which officers will be conducting inspections on commercial vehicles. They'll be looking for any violation, but there are two specific areas of focus. For drivers, it will be hours of service, and for the vehicle violations, it would be lighting that they're specifically focusing on. So a little bit about this webinar. It is one in a monthly series of webinars that AIM hosts. We have some of you out here now that join us every month, and we love to see that dedicated followership grow. So we hope more of you can join us for more webinars going forward. The subject matter of this series varies, but we consistently aim to provide valuable information to fellow members of the transportation community. The information spans from regulatory, driver-related, DOT compliance, and even sometimes we go into industry-specific things if we see something going on with one of the industries that we have a lot of customers in. Our company information, we are AIM Transportation Solutions. Many of you are familiar with us. We are the parent company of two companies, AIM Leasing Company and AIM Integrated Logistics. So AIM Leasing Company offers full service leasing, commercial rentals, maintenance programs, and professional shop management. AIM Integrated Logistics offers dedicated contract carriage and brokerage. So basically between the two companies, if there's anything out there that is commercial transportation related, we do it. As our name implies, we're an overall provider of transportation solutions. We're not a company that just hands you the keys to the car or keys to your truck and then you never hear from us again. We really aim to support you in all things that are related to your distribution function. And that's part of why we're having this webinar today. So today we have three of our seasoned experts here to get us ready for the road check. We have Ron Bork, who's our Vice President of Safety, Steve Shacklock, who's our Director of Maintenance, and Dean Kennedy, our Corporate Training Manager. This is truly an all-star lineup. So if any questions about the road check come up that aren't addressed in the presentation, or really you have any questions about anything maintenance or safety, these are the experts. These are the people that we internally turn to for counsel on these matters, and our customers turn to them as well. So we're here to support you. All right, so I am going to go ahead and pass the floor over to Steve Shacklock, our Director of Maintenance, who's going to go ahead and get us started. Steve, when you are ready, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you, Jessica.
Thank you.
First of all, I just want to thank everybody who joined us today. As Jess mentioned, I am the Director of Maintenance for AIM National Lease. Today, we're going to be touching on Roadcheck 2021 and a few well-known but simple steps we can take to prepare our fleet and our drivers for the upcoming event. All right, we're going into technical difficulties already. All right, so touch on a little history of the CVSA road checks. So CVSA's International Roadcheck began back in 1988, 8 years after the Allowance was established as a nonprofit association. Its membership mostly is comprised of commercial motor vehicle safety officials and industry representatives. So if you look at that 1988, Roadcheck has been going on for 30 plus years. So we're going to be tossing around a lot of letters today. So I figured I'd throw some up there just so everybody can understand what we're looking at. So FMVSS is your Federal Motor Carrier Vehicle Safety Standards. FMCSA is Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. CSA score, which is your Safety and Compliance and Accountability score. And then CVSA, which is your Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance. Okay. So, nearly everybody who's been in the transportation industry for more than a few years knows about this annual road check event. This is a 72-hour road check that's going to be taking place May 4th through 6th, when roadside inspection officers come out in the masses to conduct vehicle and driver inspections of commercial vehicles traveling the highways. All right. So a road check is carried out at about roughly 2,500 fixed and temporary inspection locations and typically involves over 10,000 CVSA and FMCFA inspectors. During the 2020 event, nearly 15 trucks or buses were inspected per minute on average. So if we do a little quick math, that's over 900 units per hour. Okay. According to the FMCSA, the lighting violation, lamps inoperable, was the #1 vehicle violation in year 2020, accounting for approximately 12.24% of violations discovered that year. So of the 50,151 inspections conducted during Roadcheck 2020, more than half of those were standard level 1 inspections. It's the most comprehensive roadside inspection that they can do. Of those 22,000 plus level 1 inspections conducted in the US, vehicle out of service rate was 22.2% and the driver out of service rate was 5.3%. By comparison, and they use 1991 here, that's the first year that they actually had data to support this. The overall level 1 inspection out of service rates were 34.8% for vehicles and 5.6% for drivers. So if you take into account the increase in truck traffic on the highways over the last 20 years, that 12.6 number is quite a good benchmark. Fleets are more compliant than ever due to increased safety measures. Included on this tab is a link to the cvsa.org website. And this particular link is going to give you the actual inspection levels as to what you can expect if you are pulled for a DOT inspection. Also down here in the right corner is the North American Standard Roadside Inspection Vehicle Cheat Sheet. This is a very valuable resource for any fleet managers, drivers, operations managers to go in here and actually get a look as to what you can expect if you are pulled for a DOT inspection. A couple other things to note during this event, make sure you urge your drivers to comply with social distancing and COVID regulations, and also urge them that a good yes sir or yes ma'am can get you a long way with an officer. We found that if we be polite to them, they will be polite to us. So we're going to touch on pre-trip and post-trip inspections real quick. These are required. Inspections can detect small issues before they become large problems. And make sure you report items to the service department before and or after inspections. Safety should be a driver's #1 priority, not only during the 72-hour inspection, but all day, every day. If we take into consideration, a lot of reportable defects can be found and repaired with a good, thorough pre-trip inspection. If you're a current AIM National Lease customer, please reach out to your local AIM branch for assistance on any repairs that are needed. Okay. And then also use today's technology to aid with inspections. On this slide, I've got features such as Navistar's lamp check. It can aid in walk around inspections. But if you look at the little number 5 denoted down there, the lamp check button is a button on the dash of the truck that you can actually press as you're doing a pre-trip inspection. And once that lamp check button is depressed, it's going to use the vehicle's control module to activate your brake, your marker, your clearance, and your headlights until deactivated by the user. It's a nice little feature that we use. A lot of drivers find it useful when they're doing pre-trip inspections. Make sure that you check your vehicle owner's manual to see if your fleet is equipped. And the switch is indicated again there by that little number 5. As a driver is performing a walk-around inspection, all components of the vehicle should be inspected. So we're going to touch on some basic pre-trip inspection steps here. Anybody with a CDL knows how this dance goes. So we're going to check the overall appearance upon approach, review previous trip DVIR report, conduct a walk-around inspection, check your headlights, auxiliary lights, and 4-way flashers, check the stop lights and turn signals, check the engine compartment, adjust the seat and mirrors, and inspect the interior, and then check the air brake system. All right. And then as we're en route, there's some inspections that we need to be doing while we're actually traveling with the vehicle. Tires and wheels, lights, make sure you're checking for leaks, oil and coolant, verify all compartments are closed, and then check for damage. Is that cap we picked up a few miles back, did it cause any damage to this vehicle? And now is probably a good time to inspect it. Checking units over at fuel stops and during driver breaks can also aid in catching issues early. Most fleets would rather make these repairs at a roadside brake stop or a fuel stop than at an actual inspection station. And then post-trip inspections. This is also another good place where you can catch and prepare for road check coming up. The procedures for doing a pre-trip and post-trip inspection are very similar. The biggest difference is the documentation and how the post-trip is conducted. So these are either called a driver vehicle inspection report. They're sometimes abbreviated and called a DVIR or a VIR. If a defect is noted, the vehicle must be inspected or repaired or signed off by the motor carrier before it is returned to service. Noted defects must be addressed and signed off before the unit can be considered fit for duty. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dean Kennedy, who's our training manager. Dean has some more good advice and some steps we can take to prepare for this upcoming inspection.
Thank you, Steve. All right, hopefully everyone can see my screen now. Someone could confirm for me, that would be great.
We can. Looks good, Dean.
Okay, so like Steve had mentioned, there's a bunch of acronyms we throw around. So the next one I want to talk about today is the CBSA. So like you'd mentioned, and Jessica also mentioned, was each year the CBSA asked its members and jurisdictions to capture data on certain categories of violations. So they're making their way through all the vehicle systems. And this year, as mentioned, they're going to focus heavily on driver fitness and vehicle mechanical fitness. So they're going to be looking at hours of service and lighting primarily. Now, this doesn't mean that they couldn't possibly cite you for something else they find during those inspections, but the real focus of the inspection this year is going to be on these couple items. So the details of the regulations that they're going to hold our trucks to can be found online. fmcsa.dot.gov is a great resource for it. There's no login required. The link that's in this PowerPoint that's going to be made available after is active, and it'll take you to the regulations that they're going to use. This is the standard they're going to hold us to. So we're going to focus on Part 393, which is parts and accessories. Excuse me, accessories necessary for safe operation, particularly subpart B. Your lamps, reflective devices, and electrical wiring. And I thought this was a good time to mention a secondary resource for a driver glove box edition for the FMCSA safety regulations. So the J.J. Keller one on here this is the one we use to give to our drivers, and it'll answer a lot of questions you might have. So just a quick rundown of it. It's going to detail the federal motor carrier safety regulations, including the ones we're going to talk on today. But beyond that, there's a lot of good information in here. Whether you have an issue, a question about driver qualification, hours of service, possibly even load securement, you can find the answers to most of those questions in one of these reference guides like this. Now, another resource I like to use is the manufacturers of a lot of the safety-related components that we find on a truck. So the example I have on your screen now is from Grody. They're a light manufacturer. This is out of their technical information, Chapter 17 in particular, and that link will take you directly to that. Now, this reference guide actually goes hand in hand with the one that you'll see in the FMCSA guidelines. They look almost identical. It's going to give you the details of lighting identification. What is the proper name for a light? How many are required? What is the placement? What color do they need to be? So a lot of information about minimum requirements. Now, I also want to mention, if we add any additional lights to a truck, we want to keep in mind that although, at a minimum, the factory lighting will make us compliant. In a lot of cases, people like to add additional ornamental lights onto a truck. And we need to keep in mind that if we do add these ornamental lights to the truck, they need to function as the original ones do. So, they need to turn off and on just like the original. And also they need to be functional. So the more ornamental lighting we put on a truck, the more we kind of open ourselves up to a possible citation. Even though we went above and beyond the minimum, because they're on the truck, they need to function. So there's a lot of great information from that manufacturer. And even though most of us aren't really thinking about colder climates now, unless you live in the Youngstown, Ohio area where we had snow this morning, one thing I wanted to bring up was the LED lighting that most trucks are equipped with today. These don't typically create heat as a byproduct. So you need to keep in mind during the colder weather, where it's snow or ice, we're manually going to have to de-ice these and make sure they're clear. So although they're great, they last a whole lot longer. The maintenance is by far reduced as, replacing failed incandescent lights. But we do need to make sure we keep them clean because they're not going to defrost the snow off of them all by themselves. Oops, sorry. And one of the other ones that was brought up was safer. It's the FMCSA Safety and Fitness Electronic Record. This is our safer rating. This, it offers a company safety data, related services to industry and the public over the internet. This is readily available to anybody that would seek out the name of your company or a particular carrier, whether it be by DOT number or name. And there is an active link on this slide as well. Now, this site is required by the enforcement for them to use this to take a look at our safer ratings. So, in my opinion, when they're looking at it, they're going to bring up your DOT when you end up at a brake check, and they're going to take a look at your safer rating. This kind of gives them an idea of what they can expect. What is the condition of your truck? How often are you passing these? Are they finding deficiencies, more often than not? So this is something we need to protect and try to make sure that we keep our safer rating as good as it can be. On a yearly basis, about 1 million brake-related violations get recorded. Now, each of those brake-related violations can affect your safer rating by 4 points. Form and manner, which is going to be spoken to later in the webinar here. That's your paperwork, your driver log, all of that. That's 25% of the violations typically that get given at a road check. And those ones carry 5 points each. Outdated logs, they're about 28%. And you'll notice that the penalties keep increasing. Those are going to give you about 6 points each against your safer rating. And then the last one that I wanted to bring up here was about 11% are for tires. They're right out in the open. They're part of our daily pre and post trip. And, one of the most important things that we're going to look at as far as the overall safety of the truck. And those carry a pretty harsh penalty, about 8 CSA points for each one of those. But we really need to focus on not only these items that I mentioned, the truck overall, but these are some of the heavy hitters. Now, as far as the safer rating and what it means to you and your customers in the industry, they categorize these and they give us a rating, whether it be satisfactory, conditional, or unsatisfactory. A satisfactory is obviously a good, satisfactory rating. Conditional, they're still going to let you operate the truck, and you're going to be on a little bit of probation there. They're typically going to give you some time to straighten out your process to make sure that your trucks are more compliant from a safety standpoint, and give you an opportunity to put the right checks and balances in place to make sure the trucks are being taken care of and are safe to operate. If you do happen to find yourself in an unsatisfactory setting or rating on there, they're going to give you 45 to 60 days to make the improvements. And if after those, 45 to 60 days, you haven't succeeded on your improvements and definitely improved your inspection scores and your safer rating, they're probably not going to allow you to continue operating. So this is crucial that we take care of our safer rating. This is what potential customers are going to look at, before they decide to use you for their hauling purposes. Your insurance company might look at this when it comes time to quote a price on what it's going to cost you for coverage. This is really your report card. How well are you doing as far as operating a safe fleet? So that covers what I was hoping to cover with everyone today.
Thank you very much, Dean. I think that was, you and Steve both did a really great job of covering the vehicle side and showing us how we can stay compliant for not only this upcoming inspection blitz, but just good practice for all around. So that was fantastic. We're going to kind of switch gears now. And if you want to, Dean, hit the stop share, then we can give the share screen to Ron. And where we had Steve and Dean go over the vehicle compliance, Ron is going to go over the safety compliance for the drivers. And one thing, I saw a question pop up. I will be sending out an email tomorrow to everyone who registered for this webinar with a link to this video recording, as well as PDF copies of the presentations you're viewing today that'll include active links to all of the websites that were referenced and that will be referenced as Ron goes through his presentation, as well as contact information for myself and our 3 co-hosts. So look for that tomorrow morning, and feel free to follow up with us with anything you have that wasn't covered.
Thank you, Jessica and Dean and Steve. If you can just allow me 1 more minute, I'm almost there.
I have a question if I can jump in.
Sure.
As far as road checks concerned, how does that in the suburban areas? Like for local trucks, or is it more, road trucks? Because I was when you said you had your X amount of stations that'll be inspecting trucks, are those going to be mainly on the interstates, or will there be some of that stuff in the suburbs too?
That's a good question. Steve, Dean, or Ron, do any of you know?
You're going to see the primary focus out on the highways at your weigh stations. You could see inspections anywhere, and it's one of the few areas of the law where a law enforcement officer doesn't need any, I forget the correct term, they don't need a reason to stop a truck driver to inspect him. It's the only place in America where a law enforcement officer can just stop him just to check him out. So it could happen anywhere, but the majority of your inspection activity will occur on the interstates at your weigh stations where you're normally seeing activity. So you have a small uptick in inspection activity at this time, and the road check really just is a reporting function about the specific focus area. So there's a lot of education that'll go on with the inspections at this time of year. So during the 72 hours of road check, you should expect your drivers to get a little more feedback from the officer, and there will be more officers on the road doing inspections. They're doing a lot of inspections anyway, but they're doing more inspections this time of year. It's a slight uptick, and there will be more education, and then there's the reporting focus on this year hours of service and the vehicle fitness items. So I hope that answers your question.
The reason I was asking is we're in the Chicago area around the airport, and I mean there's a massive amount of local trucks and trailers in this area on a daily basis. So they're not really highways or interstates that they're driving on. It's mostly regular highways or roads, in a commercial area.
So most of your local jurisdictions aren't members of CVSA. This is a CVSA event. It's part of their initiative with their member jurisdictions. So, if you're in Elmhurst, Illinois, the Elmhurst cops probably aren't doing any inspections outside of their normal course of action. They may not even know that road check's going on.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, Ron, I have one more question that came through for you. And then after that, we're going to hold all questions. We'll have an open Q&A at the end when Ron, Steve, and Dean will be available. But the question was, how up to date do you have to have on your driver's physicals? How up to date do you have to be on your driver's physicals?
That's not changed, but your physicals have to be up to date. They can't be expired.
I'm actually the one, Brian Drake from Space Management Installations in Indianapolis here. Actually, what it is we drive your guys' 26-foot box truck that does not require a CDL. these are my installers that happen to drive the product to the jobs and everything. Is it still, so, I mean, they don't have CDLs. So in return, it is every 2 years to have that updated. Is it not, or is that still how it is?
So that's going to be by individual, depending on what the physician that gave them their certification gave them. They might have gotten a 30-day card, in our parlance. So if he got a 2-year certification, yes, 2 years. If you have a healthy, individual with no health problems, yeah, you're going to get a 2-year card most of the time. And those people, yes, need to review their physical every 2 years. Just as a side note, even a non-CDL driver is still subject to all of the things that we talk about today, whether it's hours of service, the vehicle issues, physicals, all of those things. The only thing that doesn't apply to a non-CDL driver in the whole book of regulations is the drug and alcohol program. So everything else applies to that non-CDL operator. The definition there is 10,000 GVW and above. And so for non-CDL equipment, you're looking at 26,000 and above is CDL. So you're looking at that range between 10,000 and 26,000. That's where you're living right now.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right. So let's move on to hours of service. Hours of service is going to be a little easier to deal with than some of the vehicle things. Hours of service is really basic to what we do in our industry. It's something we do every day. We have to be good at it in order to succeed. If we are not good at hours of service as an entity, our CSA scores are going to skyrocket. It's going to take not long at all, and we're going to be getting significant attention from law enforcement. These are some of the basics of hours of service. You've got in these blue circles a few of the concepts that we all know. The 30-minute break. You can drive 11 hours in a day. You can have a 14-hour on-duty cycle in a day. 70-hour cycle in a week, and a 34-hour reset that's typically done weekly. Most drivers are getting, their weekend resets that resets their hours. I assume I'm working on the idea that everybody on the call is familiar with these concepts and that I don't need to go over them, though if you need a little refresher, always reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to help. Some of the recent changes that you need to be aware of for Roadcheck, since they are focusing on hours of service this year, September 29th, there was a change to some of the regulations. And I'm just going to quickly recap that. We did a webinar on these changes back in September when they came through. But the short haul exception, which, by the way, creates the ELD exemption for certain drivers. If you're short haul, you don't need an ELD. And they expanded the universe of drivers that applies to. So the way they expanded it is the Class A drivers got an expanded radius of 150 air mile radius to get the short haul exception. The Class Bs already had that. In addition, they lengthened the legal day from 12 to 14 hours. So you're not required to do a graph log, and you're not required to have an ELD if you're going to be within 150 air miles and 14 hours or less. Adverse driving conditions was expanded to allow for 2 additional drive hours. The old adverse driving conditions for, traffic backups due to a crash, unforeseen weather events, and so forth. It's always been a gray area that our drivers wanted to use that, we always really want to review those instances of use, but this is one of the things that changed. That 11-hour rule became 13 hours of driving, and their length of their day was already expanded from 14 to 16. So they get a 16-hour on-duty period and a 13-hour driving period with the new adverse driving conditions. The 30-minute break was changed significantly, making it so that many drivers don't need to take a 30-minute break anymore. A lot of your local and the guys that are doing multiple deliveries in a day don't need to do an 30-minute break anymore. The reason they don't need to is if they've got multiple stops that they're making, many of them aren't driving 8 hours in a day. So they're only measuring the 8 hours of drive in a given day. If they exceed 8 hours of drive in a given work shift, then the driver is required to take a 30-minute break. Also, the 30-minute break can be done on duty. So they can actually be doing a delivery or a pickup, you know, even yard work, moving their truck around in the yard, dropping hook and so forth. During their 30-minute break, it's not exclusively off duty. And the sleeper berth provision was expanded to include a 7-3 split in addition to the 8-2. Again, not going to get into a ton of detail about what that means. I'll just tell you that these rules taken together provide a tremendous amount of flexibility that was much needed by your ELD drivers in order to stay within the hours of service rules and still meet the customer demands for deliveries. Beyond hours of service, there are a host of things that we want to remind our drivers about, especially during road check when they are more frequently going to be inspected. So some of the things that we're reminding our drivers about beyond hours would be the documentation that they need for their ELD. They need to have the full user manual, the full text of their user manual, instructions for law enforcement's use of their specific ELD, and the troubleshooting and malfunction guide. Typically, your ELD provider will give these to you. Many of them are going to build it right into their app if they've got a phone app, or into their device so that it's digitally in the truck. Just make sure your drivers know how to get it. It's in all of our trucks, and I still get drivers on occasion that will get cited for not having the appropriate documents, and it's really a training issue on these drivers. They haven't realized that we've told them a number of times. So reminding our guys over and over again is imperative to avoiding these violations. In addition to having the correct documents, they also need to have 8 blank paper log sheets. In the event of a malfunction, they need to be able to revert back to a paper log. So having these log pages as part of an inspection every time they look at your driver. They're also going to be quizzed on, do they know how to use their device? Simply being untrained on the device is a violation. So they're going to usually be asked, do they know how to transmit the logs? If your drivers can readily rattle off the steps they need to take to transmit their logs, they're going to put that officer at ease and let them know that they know what they're doing with their device. As Steve mentioned earlier, that a heavy dose of etiquette with some yes sirs, no sirs goes a long way. So they should expect to be quizzed, and it's always good practice to understand that those guys are just doing their job, and to show them a little respect. In addition to hours of service and the things that the driver needs in the truck, from a compliance standpoint in the back office, it's important to make sure that your drivers, when they're not ELD exempt, are not producing more than 8 paper logs in a 30-day rolling period. So that 30-day period is not a calendar month, it's a 30-day period. And if they use the 8 days of paper logs, they must be on ELD for the days after. If their ELD malfunctions, your drivers need to communicate back to your office in writing within 24 hours. If their device is rendered unusable, not for every single malfunction, but if the device is no longer functioning, they need to notify you in writing, and you need to remedy the situation within 8 days, which coincides with the 8 days of paper logs. Also, with your equipment, if you've got a legacy system that you've had for under the AOBRD standard, you've had for a number of years, and you've done a software upgrade to get it to the ELD standard, make sure that the screen can come out of the truck, can get to the window so that the law enforcement officer can hold it out just outside the truck. It is part of the mandate, and I do still see occasional customers with that violation. In addition to that, it's always best practice to make their logs legible so that when the officer that's inspecting them reviews them, that their annotations tell the story of what they did that day. So they should always annotate their pre, inter, and post-trip inspections. their fueling stops, their pickup and delivery, or any other event that is a work event. They don't need to note when they stop for lunch, although some drivers do. They'll annotate their log with stop for lunch or lunch break. If it's their mandated 30-minute break, that's a good thing to annotate on their log. And along the same lines as on the annotations, it's a good show of respect that you're letting the officer know ahead of time with the annotations what's going on with the log, and it will let the officer know that this driver knows what he's doing. From a compliance standpoint, back in the back office, there are a few areas that our drivers, we see abuse. We tend to see abuse with some of these functions from our drivers. The guys that want to exceed hours of service, we're looking for unidentified driving events, or some of the systems have called it miles without hours. It's the guy that wants to unplug his device and keep running. All of your ELD systems are designed to capture that activity, and you need to make sure that you're monitoring those, because as they go into an hours of service focused inspection, those are items that will be reviewed by the law enforcement officer. Special driving status abuse. This is an area where if your driver's inclined to do so, he's not going to probably be generating any hours of service violations. If your ELD platform will allow company rules, you may have a company rule set to alert you to the presence of, say, personal conveyance, which is off-duty use of the vehicle, which is perfectly legal as long as it meets the correct criteria. So if your driver is taking his truck to go get lunch, or he's taking his truck to go do laundry, or he's doing some personal business in the truck, and it's okay by company policy, it's legal for him to drive that truck while off duty. We just need to make sure that he's not furthering his load, or he's not using personal conveyance to deliver his freight. And that's the type of abuse that we see. When the driver's expecting to be home on Friday afternoon, and it looks like he's going to come up 2 hours short, he'll stop on the side of the road, pop it over to PC, and keep rolling. That's something that won't flag a violation unless you go looking for it. So be sure that you know how to do that. Those are things that can be found in a roadside inspection. They're definite, they're obvious flags in the system to bring officers' eye to those on that digital download that goes from your device directly to the FMCSA. And then delivering on yard moves, that's where they're only using on-duty time to deliver, and they're operating outside of a predefined yard. Many of the systems will be able to tell if they've exceeded the yard, and some of them have a miles per hour limitation. I've definitely seen them fail. So I've seen drivers operating on yard moves for extended periods of time, covering hundreds of miles. That's an area you have to go looking for it. It's not going to create a violation. And then the other area is the over-the-road driver that uses, say, a local exception to avoid the 30-minute break, things of that nature. These systems aren't sophisticated enough to tie in the GPS record with the driver's activity to know that he's exceeded, say, the 150 air mile radius. So it's not going to create a violation for that, typically. I think there are a few systems out there that do it. Unfortunately, it's not one that we have at AIM. We use PeopleNet, and I believe that there's a new system that is just coming to market that does that. If anybody's got information about things like that, I'd love to hear about it. And that's all I've got for today. So that's kind of a good guide for things you can remind your drivers about on, some key areas to maintain compliance outside of that basic 8-hour day, 11-hour day, 14-hour day.
All right. Well, thank you, Ron. That was very thorough and some really great information on how we can keep our drivers compliant. I did have another question that came through about the COVID allowances. I saw something that I think that any vehicle carrying the vaccine would not be disrupted except for if something was very obviously hazardous. But I don't have any information other than that. Just Ron.
To be honest, I'll have to go and look that up as well. There was obviously some early suspension of hours of service for any of the emergency freight. We actually qualified for some of that with the freight that we haul, but there were some significant restrictions that maybe not want to take advantage of those. So as a company, our priority is the safety of our employees, and we chose not to try to go down that road in the event that, we were pushing a driver to run, too fatigued. So we chose not to go that route, but those do exist. And if you want to do that, that's definitely something that is possible, or at least was possible. And I'll follow up on it.
Okay. And maybe tomorrow when I send out the email recap, I can include any resources that you might find that maybe would point everyone in the right direction on that. So we are now opening up the floor for questions. If you do have a question for any of our presenters, you can go ahead and unmute yourself at this time and ask, or you can type it into the chat function, whichever you're more comfortable with. And I actually already have a couple on deck that I got asked during the session. Can I have my driver report post-trip inspections digitally rather than filling out paper forms? Steve, do you want to field this one?
Sure. So yes, DVIR and DVIR inspections can be stored electronically, but they must be able to be reproduced on demand. AIM National Lease actually has an app for that. It's called AIM Navigator that, is either iPhone or Android based, or you can do it on a web platform, but it basically is an electronic EDVR.
Perfect. And I did see Sean typed into the group that JJ Keller offers that in their application as well. But yeah, for any AIM customers, we'd highly encourage you to use AIM Navigator app. It's really seamless for the process of DVIR submission. And if anyone wants a tutorial on that, they can follow up with me after the webinar, and I'm happy to help them out with that. Okay, next question, and thank you, Steve. Do our post-trip inspection reports need submitted if no defect is found? That would be another Steve, I believe.
So I think it's 396.11 says that a driver must complete a post-trip inspection, but it does not specify that if there is a defect found that it needs to be submitted. It only states that if a defect is found that it needs to be submitted to the motor carrier for repair.
Okay. Got it. Next question is, how many bulbs on a 12 LED tail lamp assembly can be burnt out with the assembly still remaining compliant? Dean, do you want to field this one?
Sure, I think I can answer that. Typically, they're going to look at the bulb in a particular lighting position for its functionality. A lot of the new LEDs do have multiple smaller segments that are comprise the lamp assembly. The standard we tend to go by is 50%. So if you have 50%, so in your case you said 12, I believe. So 6 or more functioning, you should be okay. We would expect you to write it up if you notice any part of it was out. But a lot of those standards had to do with visibility at different distances, and with the brightness of the new LEDs, you're still going to have quite a bit of visibility at, say, 500 foot where they're, where they specify, even, missing a couple of those smaller parts.
So 50% is the general rule of thumb then?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
what I would use.
Got
Just
it.
to make sure. Play it safe.
Thank you, Dean. Okay, next question. I run from Detroit to Toronto every day. Will I be subject to be inspected twice, both in the United States and in Canada? Ron, do you think you can answer that?
Yes, Canadian provincial police are part of the CVSA. the Commercial Safety Alliance. So yes, they do participate in roadcheck, if that's the question. But you might not be inspected twice, but you could be inspected in Canada or in the US as part of roadcheck.
Okay. I have one more pop up here to everyone in the chat. If drivers are fulfilling the 30-minute rest break during a stop or because they are not driving over 8 hours, as a California company, we follow DOT law or California law when reporting 30-minute lunch rest. This is a Ron one, and this is in the chat if I didn't read that correctly.
Yeah, I see it in the chat, and I don't know the specific state regulations in California as we don't operate there. I will look it up and I will get an answer to you shortly, either before the end of this session today, or I'll reach back out to you.
Okay.
With an answer on, but if you're operating under California rules, then you need to follow the California rules if they differ. And that's what I don't know.
Got it.
Now you can choose to operate under federal regulations. So I'm assuming that the California rules are more relaxed, but I'll again check that.
Okay. Are the hours of service violations zero tolerance? By that, I mean, will a driver be written up for drive time of 8 hours and 3 minutes or on duty time of 14 hours and 2 minutes?
So the letter of the law is yes, that is a violation. If your driver is showing good faith in an effort to comply, most officers are going to work with that individual and treat them. I mean, they have the discretion to either issue the citation or not issue the citation. So we don't see too many 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute violations. But again, a little dose of kindness goes a long way. So if the driver understands that he was in a bad position and he, if he presents his case, humbly, he's probably going to be allowed that latitude. But it is the law, and it is a zero tolerance law, I guess.
Very good answer. Okay, can a local Class A delivery driver use personal conveyance to come back to the yard to pick up his car and go home?
No, he cannot. So that's about the only solid rule that we have as a company with regard to personal conveyances. We don't allow our drivers to use personal conveyance to go to any company location, whether it's a shipper, a receiver of freight, or one of our yards. And the reason for that is there's no personal reason for them to go there. It's all business. What your driver is doing in that situation, we interpret as a relocation of company equipment, and that would be not legal under the personal conveyance rules.
Okay.
That would be essentially finishing his load.
Understood. Do we have any other questions for the group? That was the last one I had. Okay, well, I'd like to thank all three of our presenters for helping us prepare for the road check. The practices they outlined were just good practice across the board, not just in preparation or during the road check. So thank you, all three of you gentlemen, very much for taking the time out of your days to help us with that information. The contact information for Ron, Steve, and Dean, as well as that of myself, will be included in the email that goes out tomorrow. If you have any questions about the road check, fleet or driver safety, or anything that wasn't addressed today or otherwise, please feel free to reach out to any of the four of us. We'd be happy to help. We hope you got what you need to be prepared for May 4th, which is just right around the corner in 2 weeks. For those of you who may feel overwhelmed about the requirements of operating a private fleet, I just want to remind you about AIM Integrated Logistics. We'd love to talk to you about that, which can let you off the hook for all of these problems and make them AIM's problem, not yours. So feel free to reach out to me if you'd like to talk about that or anything else transportation related. Thank you so much for your time and have a wonderful afternoon.
Hey, Jess.
Yes, Ron.
So the question about, I just was reading the chat about the local delivery driver question and the personal conveyance. There is an option there, and that's called the big day exception, which allows the driver to go to 16 hours on that given day if he's remained local for the previous duty tours with the same reporting location for the 5 previous duty tours. Then that driver would be permitted to use the big day exception. So it looks like your name's Marcelino. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. Just Google the big day exception. You'll see what I'm talking about.
Thank you, Ron.
No problem.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jess.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.